Bob McKenzie just put out his 2024 NHL Draft midseason rankings. We'll react to them and break down the prospects ranked, all in this episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects-related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakesh, joined by Sebastian High, and on today's show, we'll be breaking down Bob McKenzie's freshly released 2024 NHL Draft mid-season rankings. We'll talk about the prospects he ranked in his top 32, break down the standouts, players we think are too high, too low, and just our thoughts overall on this top 32. Before we get into that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app and use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Leave us a comment letting us know what your thoughts are about the podcast and what you want us to talk about next. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review. It helps out a lot, especially on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get started here. I don't think there's any debate at first overall. It's Macklin Celebrini. We can just skip over that. We've talked about him at length. I feel like he comes up every episode. So let's just glance over that and go right to second overall on Bob McKenzie's rankings. That's Anton, the 6'7", 211-pound left-handed defenseman. Second overall? What's your thoughts on that?
It's bullish. It is a bullish take and a half. Silayev is extraordinarily raw and has some similarities to Simon Edvinsson in his draft year with decision-making deficiencies, but overall fairly sound habits as a whole, a tremendous reach, extraordinarily mobile, the overall toolkit that every NHL team dreams of adding to their blue line, but who is not a slam dunk to really be a top pairing defenseman. I think there are many possibilities where his development kind of caps him off as like a number 4, number 3, depending how he keeps progressing with time. But the upside here is extraordinarily high, but it is a really risky bet at second overall on this board, as much as I love the player himself.
100%, fully agreed. This is a player who, there's a lot to work on in his game. And, as much as I love the gap closing and just the combination of skating and size, he's very wonky. And I don't know if second overall is where I'd put him. I don't think he's the best defenseman in this class, that's for sure. But moving on to third overall, Artyom Levshunov, playing in Michigan State right now. He's a Belarusian-born right-handed defenseman, physical specimen. The skating is great. The tools are really solid. I love the shot. I love the passing when he sees his lanes, but and even the habits are really good. The way he scans, the way he identifies his options when he's not pressured is really, really good. But that's the thing, is habits show up when you're not under pressure. When you're under pressure, it's reaction. It's pure reaction. It's pure composure. Levshunov is not good in those two areas. And as he climbs the ranks, it's going to get more and more obvious how bad he is when he's pressured with the puck. I think that's a big setback in his game that I don't see in other defensemen that are lower down, which is why I think that third overall is fairly rich for Levshunov, but I would not be surprised at all to see him be the actual first defenseman off the board, mainly because, he's got the things that NHL scouts love: size, skill, tools. But the mental game needs a lot of work. Again, this is a player whose panic threshold is very, very low, which makes him kind of freak out sometimes when he gets pressured and kind of throw the puck up the first option he gets. And he creates a lot of turnovers. Trey Augustine in net for Michigan State has his work cut out for him when Levshunov's on the ice. But again, the tools are really, really good. We go to fourth overall, and it's kind of the same story. Cole Ygiman. At fourth overall, I think this is, Cole Ygiman, to be perfectly honest, has probably slipped out of my top 10 entirely. He is a fantastic shooter. He's probably the best shooter in this draft, or at least tied with Celebrini in terms of overall goal scoring. I'd say Ygiman's shot is better overall in isolation, but outside of that, Ygiman's game has actually taken a step back. Like it's been rough. Like, he's not helping out defensively. His work rate is really off. The awareness of his surroundings is also really bad. He doesn't really help in transition. So you're basically getting a poacher who doesn't really do much outside of that. And there's limits to that. But then, I mean, at 5th overall, Caden Lindstrom, I don't think there's a doubt there, right? Like, we can just basically skip over this because, like, this is exactly where he should be, right?
It's a great fit at number 5. Like, I think on my personal board, he's at number 4, but I'm not going to start complaining about the 1 slot difference there.
Oh, for sure, 100%. But then got Ivan Demidov at 6 overall, and this is a bit low for my range. I think for me, like, Ivan Demidov, especially skill-wise, is right behind Celebrini. Like, he's a player I would have at 2nd overall, just because, I mean, there's not a better stick handler in this draft than Ivan Demidov, and the things he can do with the puck are ridiculous, right?
For sure. Like, I think I'm definitely opening up to the possibility of him being part of like a slightly larger tier right behind Celebrini, where you have players like Zane Parekh and Caden Lindstrom kind of contending with him in that top range for me behind Celebrini, but
Yeah.
he's still my favorite to be a 2nd overall come draft day because, as you said, the skill is tremendous. He's currently on pace for the best point per game in the MHL ever for draft eligible, and that is for good reason. Like, he is exceptionally capable and really, really intelligent and creative, which makes for a very fun prospect.
100%. I mean, the upside is off the charts with Demidov, that's for sure. I mean, if he works out the way he can, you're looking at a really, really good player. But then at 7th overall, we have Sam Dickinson, and we're a bit torn on this. I think this is low for him. I think that Dickinson should be kind of in the conversation in the top 5 among this class. You think 7 is perfectly reasonable for him, though, right?
I do. I like Sam Dickinson a lot. I think that in the last couple months, my projection of him has not changed very much, but my projection for other players have perhaps leapfrogged him. Guys like Caden Lindstrom, for instance, Zane Parekh, guys that just kind of like leapfrogged him in my rankings. Consta Helenius is also right in there with Dickinson for me as a 50-50, but I think that his range is probably like 4 to 8 in terms of what I'd be comfortable with in terms of drafting him.
For sure. I just think that, with Dickinson, I mean, you're talking about a left-handed defenseman of 6'3", 200 pounds, can play really, really well defensively. I think he's the best pure defensive player in this draft. But on top of that, yeah, I mean, on top of that, I think there's a lot of untapped offensive upside. And already, I mean, just a combination of skating and defensive acumen. Like, he reminds me so much of Caden Gooley every time I watch him. Like, just a really good shutdown defenseman that isn't scared to like throw the body, to get involved physically, but he's also pretty. I think he's a bit more capable offensively than Gooley in the sense that he makes really good decisions in transition. His passing is crisp and accurate. He's been playing on the 2nd power play for London, and he's been doing a really good job of that, just looking off his passes, finding players in stride on the half walls, and even his shot selection. You can tell that he's timing his shots with screens and stuff like that. So I think there's untapped offensive upside there that could put him in the best defenseman in this draft category. And I've only gotten more bullish on him in the last couple of months since our last rankings. So he's good. But moving on to Consta Helenius at 8th overall, a Finnish center who's about 5'11", 180, really average size. I think he's one of the smartest defensemen in this draft, smartest forwards in this draft. Like, his understanding of play is fantastic, right? Like, he keeps up with the play mentally.
He really does, and he's doing that at the Liga level, playing against like pretty solid professional competition. It's not the best European Pro League, but it is a pretty solid one as a whole, and he's been just fantastic. The production's been really impressive, which didn't really come at the World Juniors, but it's really been consistent in his league play, and he brings such versatility to the game where he is so intelligent. He's a really solid puck handler. He's a really good playmaker. Like, his playmaking has just consistently grown on me over the course of the season. His defensive impact's already a positive against professional competition. There's a lot to like in this player, and there's so much to build around with the way he processes the game and how creative he can be when he has kind of like the time and space, and more than anything, the encouragement by the coaching staff to use his creativity. Because like, one critique I'd have of his game is that he can kind of fall back into a very subtle style of play where he's not using his tools to the highest end of their capabilities, but that has been freeing up as the season's progressed, and I really hope that trend continues.
100%. Moving on to 9th overall, Zane Parekh, and we both agree this is the best defenseman in this draft. Like, no one has his offensive upside. His understanding of the game offensively is ridiculous. The way that he moves offensively is ridiculous. Constantly activating, constantly moving, constantly kind of finding space in transition. just a great offensive mind. And the defensive issues in his game have been overblown, I think. And it's just a matter of time before people come around on that and realize that, this is a player that's consistently developed that side of his game. Because, if you can just get his defensive game at an average level, his offensive game is off the charts and could just be bolstered by the additional puck touches that he would get was just an average defensive game. So I think that overall, Parekh, I mean, as a right-handed defenseman, 6 foot, 170 pounds, I think his size concerns have been overblown as well. Like he's pretty average size for a defenseman. And yeah, he just injects offense into everything he does. He's fantastic. But speaking of injecting offense into everything you do, a 10th overall to round out the top 10, Berkly Catton. For me, the most dynamic forward outside of Macklin Celebrini. Just the ability to constantly...
And Demidov.
I mean, Demidov, I would call less dynamic and more just crafty and shifty and flashy. Whereas Catton is pure dynamism in the sense that he does everything at a really high speed. He connects plays at a really high speed.
Is a difference there,
It's the pace of play. Not just the pace in terms of speed, but the pace in terms of processing. Like his brain keeps up with his feet perfectly. And I think that Catton at 10 is something that could, I mean, if you're picking up Berkly Catton at 10, you're laughing. Like, this is a really, really good prospect. And I think for me, it's closer to Caden Lindstrom than to 10th overall, than to the players that are 10th overall. But yeah, overall, I'm a big fan of Catton's, and I really like the dynamic element he brings to every shift. And yeah, overall, just a fantastic, skilled offensive player. But that rounds out the top 10 in our first segment. Now we're getting into picks 11 through 20, kind of break that down, and we'll get into that right after these messages from our sponsors over at Gametime. If you're looking to buy cheap tickets last minute for any event, Gametime has you covered. Gametime is a great source for anything that has to do with sports, comedy, theater, anything that requires tickets. You can get them up to the last minute before the event, and sometimes an hour after they start. You can still find those tickets over at Gametime. They're obsessed with saving you money. They've got zone deals where you pick the section and row, and Gametime picks the seats. And that gives you an average of about 18% of savings. And the Gametime guarantee makes sure that you always get the best price. So if you find tickets for the same price or less than what Gametime has to offer, Gametime credits you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. It's really easy. You just download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, super simple. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. So check it out at Gametime. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment, we'll talk through picks 11 through 20 and Bob McKenzie's rankings here. We'll start at 11th overall with Trevor Conley. Conley is probably the most skilled USHL player. I think I can say that with quite a bit of ease and comfort. Just overall, the skill level is off the charts. He still plays that junior game. He plays to the outside a bit and overhandles pucks and tries to push through pressure and kind of be the hero on every play. And he definitely has a skill level to do it. And the combination of skill and skating is ridiculous. And yeah, he was ranked 5th overall in the North American rankings among skaters for NHL Central Scouting. This is the very highest end of his range for me. Like, I think this is the highest I would be comfortable with having him. I don't think he's a top 10 prospect, but I wouldn't have him too far behind this. Like, I'd say 11 to 16, 17, 18. Like, this is kind of the range I'd have him in and I'm comfortable with. But at 12th overall, a prospect that's been really, really polarizing in the scouting sphere, we've got Carter Yakimchuk. Yeah, just what's your thoughts on him overall?
He's a fascinating player. I mean, he has a tremendous offensive toolkit. Like, the shot, the mobility is really solid. He has really been working on his timing of his shots, which was, I think, one of my personal big qualms in his game early on this season. But it really is the offensive toolkit that's just blindingly good. The defensive consistency is a really big question mark.
Yeah,
I've had some viewings where he's looked quite solid. Like, I remember at the U18s in the summertime, I caught like one viewing that was like really quite impressive defensively, and then every WHL viewing I've had since then was a lot more like shaky. But he's a player that I think we're a bit too low on in our first rankings at Dobber. I think that the overall toolkit and the flashes of creativity and really like forward thinking, like a processing in terms of constructing quite like high end plays and implementing more give and goes and moving off puck a lot better in transition. Like the progression's been very nice, and obviously the WHL production's been off the charts good.
For sure. And then we go to 13th overall, and Zeev Buium is there, the left-handed defenseman who recently played a really great World Juniors tournament, scored 5 points in 7 games, and including the insurance goal in the gold medal game, which is not easy when you're a defenseman, an 18-year-old defenseman that made Team USA. Like, that's not an easy feat already, but to be that good in that tournament, I mean, it's fantastic. His offensive game is ridiculous. He's so wriggly. He's so elusive from the blue line. He's able to find the smallest little crevices in defensive formations and just kind of squeeze through them and make a play. Fantastic shot from the blue line as well. I love his wrister. It's really the skating that stands out with Buium, and his draft -1. This was a player that focused a lot more on defense and used the skating defensively really well. And now he's just going all out on offense and showing his offensive skill set. But I still think he can combine those two play styles into one cohesive, cool toolkit. And if he does, we're looking at one of the highest upside defensemen in this draft. Like, he has a lot of potential. Then at 14th, Artyom Jiricek, who just recently suffered a season-ending injury in the first game of the World Juniors. Probably a multiple tear of his knee, of the ligaments in his knee, like just a really, really bad injury. But I think there's still potential in Artyom Jiricek. I think there's still a really, really intense player there who works really well off the puck and does really great things off it, but still is working on his confidence with it. I think that's the main thing with Jiricek. At 15th, we have Emil Hemming. For me, this is really high. I was not impressed at all with what I saw from Hemming at the World Juniors. I wasn't impressed as well with his tape in Liga and in the J20. Like, this is a really good shooter who's a really heavy player and plays a heavy style. He's really tough to knock off the puck, but like what he brings outside of that, I'm not too sure. And it's weird seeing him above some of the names that are below him that we would probably have in our top 10, right? Like this is a bit high. But talk me through Tij Iginla's game, because there's a lot. I mean, this is the son of Jarome Iginla, a Hall of Famer, a player who's going to be, who's a legend to the game. And I mean, yeah, Calgary Flames fans are already salivating at this. So let's talk through it a bit.
For sure, Tij Iginla is really fun. The shooting skill is the thing that pops off the page, but his off-puck movement and his offensive intelligence have really come a long way this season compared to what they were at when he was in more of a bottom 6 role with Seattle last year. But playing like top-line minutes with a player of the caliber of Andrew Crystal, who can create opportunities for him at like 8 times a shift in the offensive zone, it seems. Ridiculous. But he's been like attached at the hip with a player of tremendous skill and real like raw creativity that has allowed Iginla to really like double down on the goal scoring element, the offense. And I've loved to see that this season. I think it's been a great fit for him alongside Crystal, but I'd like to see the defensive game take a couple more steps. I think that there's a level of anticipation and intensity in his game that would apply quite well to the defensive zone that I haven't quite seen yet in my viewings. But have you seen something a bit more promising on that side of the puck?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot more intricacy to his game than I saw, especially last year with Seattle. Like, this is a player who's evolved a lot since then, and obviously, like, playing with a high skill teammate like Andrew Crystal, a really good playmaker like Crystal, like that's going to help your game. But yeah, I mean, the off-puck movement's been solid. The main issue with Iginla is you're not really going to get much out of him defensively. Like, he'll try for sure, but he's not really aware of where threats are coming from and doesn't have really the habits down in order to be a consistent defensive player. But the offensive game is really, really good. I think the goal scoring is going to translate. And yeah, I think he's worth a shot in this range. But then this next range of 4 players, it doesn't make sense to me. Like, first, Liam Greentree at 17th out of Windsor. He's just, for me, he's become a top 10 player. He's become like a lower end of the top 10, but still top 10 player. Like 8 to 12 is where I'd put him. Just mainly because, I mean, his only issue really is his skating. He's really smart. He's really inside driven. He pushes the middle constantly. And just wicked wrister, great playmaking as well. I think the playmaking is really underrated with Greentree. Like, just there's such a really good, well-rounded offensive skill set there that, I mean, I struggle not to see an NHLer here. And yeah, he's been impressing me more with every viewing. And after that, we've got Igor Chernyshov, who I also think should be higher. A really strong player on the puck who loves to lower the shoulder and drive the net. And has some really good habits off the puck as well. Great work rate. Like, there's so much to love. Then you have Beckett Seneca at 19. this is like the very, very high level of his range for me. Like, he's a really good defensive player. I won't take that away from him. I just don't see much in terms of offensive skill set that jumps off the page. Then after those three guys, we have Michael Brandsegg-Nygård at 20th overall, which is very low. Like, I understand his World Juniors caused some concern. Like, he wasn't as engaged as he was and still is in the Allsvenskan, but he has like, what, I think he has like six points in his last 5 games in the Allsvenskan. Like, the puck's finally going in and now he's dropped in the rankings. Like, something's up here, because Brandsegg-Nygård is one of the most mature and responsible players from this draft. Great work rate. And on top of that, he showcased at the World Juniors, and since then, that he has the offensive ability to put the puck in the back of the net. Like, he's shooting a lot more. He's making these plays at high speeds. And yeah, it just doesn't make sense for me. I don't understand what's going on here. But listen, this is what Bob McKenzie's hearing through the grapevine, and kind of he's reading through the tea leaves and trying to like make sense of what this draft's going to be, because it's honestly a crapshoot once you leave first overall. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Brandsegg-Nygård drop. I just think that this is a mistake. Like, he's a really, really good player. But that wraps up our second segment. Now we'll get into our third and break down picks 21 through 32 to end out Bob McKenzie's first round. And we'll get to that right after these messages from sponsors over at Sleeper.
It's almost the halfway point of the NHL season, and regardless of where your team sits in the standings, you can still get in on the action with Sleeper, which is our #1 choice for your daily fantasy hockey app of choice here at the Locked On NHL Network. That's because you get to win 100 times your money on Sleeper, and all you have to do so is correctly predict the outcome of 8 specific player stats. And you can get creative with those, whether you want to bet on the stars of the league to keep producing, whether it be Nikita Kucherov getting another 3 assists in a game, or I don't know, Nathan McKinnon getting a Gordie Howe hat trick. The choice is yours. So use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability.
All right, so let's close things off with picks 21 through 32 and Bob McKenzie's top 32 rankings for the midseason of the 2024 NHL Draft. By the way, this is not Bob McKenzie's personal opinion. This is just what he's trying to make sense of from what he's been hearing around the league, from the inside information he has on where teams stand on these particular prospects. So let's start at 21st overall with Ryder Ritchie. This is a range where I see him going. This is a range where I'm comfortable having him as well. I was a lot more bullish on him earlier this year. I saw a really creative stick handler with really high-end offensive abilities, but the more you watch him, the more you see these small issues in this game that could hold him back. First and foremost, I mean, he doesn't really, he struggles to corral pucks really well off the first touch. The puck seems to just bounce off his stick, and it has to do with the mechanics, it has to do with his posture. Like, there are some issues there. So I understand him being at 21. I still think he's got potential as a winger. I think he's going to be a really good player at the next level. I just think that there's a lot more work to do with him than the players ahead of him. That brings us to 22nd overall with Sasha Boisvert out of the Muskegon Lumberjacks in the USHL. Really skilled, really creative player who seemed to score a highlight reel goal every second game in the USHL. He's kind of toned that down and shown a bit more maturity. I really like his inside game. I like how involved he's been defensively as well. Lots to love there. But I want you to talk me through Aron Kiviharju, because I haven't gotten a really long look at him. He's been injured for the longest while, and I'd say the last time I watched him was probably in October. So talk me through what you've seen from Kiviharju and what makes you kind of see him as the 20. What makes Bob McKenzie put him here at 23 in his rankings?
Yeah, it's quite similar to my range for Kiviharju at the moment.
Yeah.
Like in my current rankings, I have Kiviharju at 23 as well. Wow, what a coincidence. So I think that this is the range. I've looked at a decent amount of tape from earlier on this season before his injury, and the more I've seen, while I certainly have a great appreciation for his really impressive level of intelligence and the passing abilities, off the charts good, the overall toolkit gives me a bit more pause now than it did in the fall. Now that you're seeing what other players are really doing in the last couple of months, which Kiviharju has of course missed, which is really unfortunate. I'm really curious to see how he is when he comes back from injury, but I've seen a lot of players that have inspired a lot more confidence as an overall projection of toolkit rather than a bet on individual tools. And I think if Kiviharju wants to catch up that ground when he gets back from injury, a really important part of that is going to be to round out his game into a really comfortable and cohesive toolkit, because as of right now, it really is just it's brains and passing ability, and that's about it, which leaves a lot of gaps in his overall performances.
Absolutely makes sense. And at 24th overall, we have Andrew Basha out of Medicine Hat, which he's been playing a lot with Kaden Lindstrom recently. Now both of them are out injured. Lindstrom had a season-ending, almost season-ending shoulder surgery, which he should be back for. I mean, I'd say around March or April is when we'll see him again. But Basha, I'm not too sure what happened with his injury, but Basha, I mean, you watch his game, what immediately stands out is he's one of the fastest players on the ice constantly. I mean, he has the energy on top of having the speed. It reminds me a bit of Oliver Moore in his draft year, very early on. Not as high as skill level, but the same kind of powerful, energetic, and just raw, speedy type of game. Like I love that style of play, and I think any team that's looking to inject speed into their lineup should take a really long, hard look at Andrew Basha, because he's got that. Then we have Tanner Howe, which is almost a polar opposite. He's this year's Brendan Gallagher. Really hard worker. Plays on the wing for Regina, and he's their captain already as an 18-year-old. He's about 5'10", 180 pounds. And just the effort levels off the charts. The defensive game is really good. And he has a real dual threat game. He's not a pure shooter. He's not a pure playmaker, but he does a bit of both. And a lot of his goals will come from around 3 feet around the goal. So he has that capability. And I really like the fact that he's just dragging his team in terms of energy on almost every shift. Then at 26, a player I was really, really surprised to see here. We've got Jett Luchanko, a 5'10", 165-pound center that plays for the Guelph Storm, the OHL. There's a player that Bob McKenzie has at 67th overall that I think has everything that Jett Luchanko has and a bit more. So I don't get this, and I'm going to take a longer, harder look at Jett Luchanko to see why NHL teams seem to be so high on him based on what Bob McKenzie's reporting. I don't know, man. This one's weird. Any thoughts on this overall? Like, what could rationalize this at all, or do you have no idea?
I mean, I haven't watched as much of Luchanko as you have, so I think I'm even more in the dark here than you are. But like the playmaking ability is quite impressive. There are some really solid tools in there. It's just a bit strange because he is like he doesn't have the profile of a player that you usually see be like have NHL scouts be really bullish on as an undersized forward, right? Like he's 5'10", 165, decent playmaker, but very much perimeter based. Whereas the player at 67th overall, who we're definitely going to get into in the next episode, Luke Misa, for both of us is a slam dunk top 20 prospect and brings at the very least comparable level of playmaking with a ton of pace, a lot of defensive ability, and a really, really high-end hockey IQ that I have not seen from Luchanko so far.
Yeah, this one's weird. I mean, I'll get into it. Like, he's probably the first prospect I'm going to scout as soon as we're done recording here. But we'll check that out later on and kind of report back. But then we have Tarek Parasak at 27th. And this, I mean, you know how much of a fan I am of this player. His skating is, like, honestly very, very bad. But he's probably a top 2, top 3 most intelligent prospect in this draft. His shot is really good and has impressed me a lot more over my past viewings. Not just in terms of volume, but also in terms of accuracy from the half wall. And yeah, just every time I watch him, I get reminded of draft year Nick Suzuki, which is a good thing. Like overall, he's really smart, not a good skater, really good shot, and decent playmaking as well. So I think he should be higher, but I'm not arguing too much on that. We have Charlie Elick at 28th overall. 6'3", 200-pound defenseman playing with the Brandon Wheat Kings in the WHL. I watched him literally yesterday, and I could not pick him out of a group. I mean, apart from the size and kind of the skating, but even then, it's kind of wonky. I have trouble with Charlie Elick in terms of decision making, in terms of habits, in terms of processing. The mental game he doesn't have locked down, but again, this is a big defenseman, and teams love big defensemen, so you never know. Then we have Matvei Gridin, who is Sacha Boisvert's teammate and line mate with Muskegon in the USHL, and this is a player who's very, very raw and does a couple things really well, but is far from having a complete game. So I'm not comfortable with him in our first round for the rankings we're going to have over at Dauber Prospects, but I would understand why teams would like him. He's a great shooter. He's a great stick handler. He's a great playmaker. But another player who plays a bit more of that linear junior style where he's just barreling down the side of the ice. And then we have Cole Baudouin at 30th overall out of Barrie in the OHL. We saw him a bit at the U18 Worlds. He's a big, strong center who loves to drop the shoulder and protect the puck. I think he's one of the best puck protectors in this draft. But overall, there are some big questions about his ability to play more intricately, play with more finesse. He's, again, a very linear, very straightforward player.
But good defensively, at least.
I mean, for sure. Absolutely. Great defensively, great puck protector, plays that power style. There's not much finesse to his game. And then at 31st overall, I want to ask you about this because I haven't watched much of him. Lucas Pettersson, a Swedish center playing with Modo in the Swedish J20 right now. What's your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, look, if Luchanko is a player that you're going to be watching right after this episode, I think Pettersson is going to be the one that I'm focusing in on because I've watched a couple games of his and I thought that he's been quite solid, but I've always seen him more as a second or third round player. He's quite intelligent, quite versatile, but a little bit of a jack of all trades at the J20 level, but doing it very, very well. But it's the J20 level in Sweden, which isn't the highest quality of competition, not quite comparable to the CHL leagues in Canada or the USHL. And playing that jack of all trades role is still a little bit of a question in my eyes of just exactly how he project as an NHLer at the end of the day. But he is, like, the intelligence has been the standout quality in my viewings, and there's a decent level of effort on both sides of the puck and a decent level of defensive engagement as well. Like, he's a real leader on the ice, and I can see the appeal of having him in this range, but I still need to see a little bit more in terms of real projectable individual strengths that would distinguish him from the pack to share this level of optimism.
For sure. And just to end things off here for the top 32, we have Dean Letourneau out of the Sioux Falls Stampede in the USHL. Up until recently, he was playing in Canadian college, but he's a 6'6", 210-pound center. And I get the appeal. He is violent. He's aggressive. He pushes the middle constantly on the puck. He loves to throw the body. Like, there are things in his game that scouts are going to love, but I think if you take the same player and make him 6'1", 180 pounds, he does not get drafted anywhere near the top 90. Like, there's no way. There's a lot missing in his game offensively. He's pretty linear. He's pretty straightforward. Doesn't think the game at an advanced level. He's a big guy who can skate fairly well, who can throw the body, and loves to cut inside of play. That's about what you're getting out of him. I don't think that's worth a first-round pick, but who knows? Maybe his play with the USHL now will kind of make that change. I'd be surprised if I turn around on this player, but we'll see. But that wraps things up for our episode today. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to leave us a comment letting us know what you want us to talk about next and what your thoughts are on this top 32. Talk me through your surprises here, players you weren't expecting to hear in this first round. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating and review. You have no idea how much it helps. And make sure to make it your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. You'll get all your news and updates on the 24/7 news channel about sports. They'll talk you through what's going on with the Bills and a lot more. And make sure to tune in for our next show as we continue our breakdown and rankings, this time talking about picks 33 through 80 and the honorable mentions on Bob McKenzie's rankings. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.